We are on a massive recording roll today, so apologies if I'm a bit tired or a little bit scatterbrained. Just come straight from recording all the Fire Mage stuff. We did Frost Mage earlier as well. Just trying to squeeze all this stuff in before they wipe all the characters so that I'm actually able to show you this stuff, because we're not sure what sort of state we're going to be in. But Arcane Mage. Arcane Mage. This spec has actually received a lot of love. It's not the most popular spec. In fact, I think it was like the third or fourth. It's like down there with Sub Rogue and like Survival Hunter in patch 8.3 in BFA. Not a popular spec at all. So I think that some of the changes here have been a bit of a sleeper. Sleeper changes. They haven't got too much love, too much attention, because it's a little bit somewhat of a forgotten spec, I think it's fair to say. And honestly, this spec for me has been an extremely pleasant surprise. In fact, this has been possibly the most fun I've had playing a spec, like just total, on the Shadowlands beta. This has been an absolutely phenomenal spec. Let me show you what they've done. The first big change that they've done is they've changed how the cooldowns and your cooldown planning works for the Arcane Mage. So whereas in BFA you were playing around Arcane Power on a 1.5 minute cooldown, and it was really building, like playing around those 1.5 minute cooldown burn phases, they've totally reworked this. And they split it sort of into two different things, right? So you have Arcane Power, but it is now a 3 minute cooldown. Although it does last for 15 seconds, so it lasts longer. So they made this a slightly bigger and more powerful cooldown, but at 3 minutes. So you got a very big burn phase every 3 minutes. And then to supplement this, Touch of the Magi, which was previously a random chance proc talent, is now a baseline ability with a 45-second cooldown, 40-yard range, costs 5,000 mana, 1.5-second cast, slightly reduced by haste. Apply Touch of the Magi to your current target, accumulating 30% of the damage you deal to the target for 8 seconds, and then exploding for that amount of arcane damage to the target, and then reduce damage to all nearby enemies. And I just absolutely love what they've done with this. Because what it means is that it gives you a much more, it gives a much shorter sort of cycle to how you're thinking about and how you're planning and how you're moving around the dungeon and the fight as the Arcane Mage, where now every 45 seconds, you've got this mini burn phase every 45 seconds where you want to slam as much single target damage into your Touch of the Magi target as possible. And even in dungeons, this works super well, because then at the end of it, they're going to explode and they're going to do a whole bunch of cleave damage then to everything near them. So it's fantastic. Not only is it a single target burst cooldown, you know, like 30% more damage is the same as an Arcane Power. It's 30% more damage. You know, it's great. Really, really good. But yeah, so it's a single target burst. It works great in single target. And then it also lets you not only just be doing like your AoE rotation of like arcane explosions and arcane barrages in AoE, but now you can easily interweave that single target burst rotation with your arcane missiles and all those procs into that, and that's still going to function really strong in AoE and also give you like priority damage and all that good stuff. It kind of captures, I think, the essence of what made Fire Mage and BFA really cool, where Combustion was a big single target nuke, but it also had a ton of cleave value. This is like obviously that on a much smaller scale, but still very cool. If I show you the effect for Touch of the Magi here, in fact, let me do, whoops, wrong button. I like to show you like an idea for like your very, very small sort of rotation here. We're going to go Rune of Power. Okay, let's Touch of the Magi. This is actually great. We got Arcane Missiles. We'll fire off our Arcane Missiles into it. Great, awesome. Then we'll blast a couple of Arcane Blasts. Actually, we got another Arcane Missiles. That's great too. There you go. And boom. Boom, boom, boom. We just did a whole bunch of damage there. And you can see Touch of the Magi is exploded for 6,000 damage to the target as well. And that is obviously going to spread then in the cleave. So it's a nice little extra bit of burst. Also worth noting, this of course syncs up really well with the Rune of Power talent. So Rune of Power has a 1.5 second cast time. It has 10 second buff. This is the 1.5 second cast time that has an 8 second buff. So the two of these overlap perfectly, right? You're going to go into your Rune of Power, Touch of the Magi combo like every 45 seconds, and that's a really fun thing to plan around and play around, in my opinion. Presence of Mind, which is your 1 minute cooldown, this now has an extra rank, so it will make your next 3 arcane blasts be instant cast. So that is now like an extra thing that you've got going for you. It is actually like a damage increase, I believe, because you know arcane blast is a 2.1 second cooldown, and this is not on GCD, so it's actually a damage increase to weave this into like your damage, your burn windows. I'm not sure if that's intended or if it's supposed to be more of a movement thing. I'm new to Arcane Mage. It's a spec I've really slept on. So yeah, but I mean, definitely three more Arcane Blasts on the move is cool. It feels great. And I've got Slipstream's talented here, so get some nice mobility out of that, which is awesome. So that's very, very cool that is better. Clear casting is now better as well. Clear casting are the procs whenever you spend mana. Depending on how much mana you spent, you have a chance to gain clear casting, making your next arcane missile or arcane explosion be free, and making the missiles channel faster. That can now stack up to 3 times, I believe. I don't know if we'll actually manage to get it here. Let's see if we can spend enough mana. We're just going to spam Arcane Blast. We'll see if we can proc it. Like, there's 1. Oh, there we go. There's 2 stacks. You see it refreshes the duration too. Can we get up to 3? I don't know. I've been dumb. No, it does stack to 3. I'm not a total dummy. So, like, right now we could go, like, Rune of Power, Touch of the Magi, and let's start blasting. There's 1. There's 2. There's 3. Hooey! Bam! And it explodes, and we just did a nice chunk of damage there. Yeah, pretty cool, right? Kind of fun. And obviously that's like mana free, gives you lots of mana regen. So yeah, very positive change there. Mastery has also been buffed, so this is phenomenal. So it increases your maximum mana and your mana regen, increases the damage of Arcane Blast and Arcane Barrage with charges, but it now also increases all other arcane damage by 13%. So this is great, because I mean, basically all your stuff is arcane damage. So this is really, really good, particularly for AoE, right? You know, Arcane Explosion, the obvious one here, the elephant in the room. That's going to be great. Mastery is not going to be a dead stat there, and it just means that you're going to be weaving your mastery in way more often. It's going to feel phenomenal, right? It's just going to be really, really good. So yeah, makes the stats have a better balance. Okay, we have another thing here which is kind of funny, which is Conjure Mana Gem. This is back. This is a weird one, right? Conjure Mana Gem, consume it to restore 10% mana. If I get into combat here, there we go. It does have a 2-minute cooldown, which is really substantial. So I don't know. This is such a minor thing. Maybe it will end up being more impactful than it is. It just seems like more of a very, very small but flavorful thing. If you into extra keybinds, or maybe you don't even put this off on a sidebar and have just the keybind for Mana Gem or something. But yeah, it's an intriguing one. So that's there for a bit of flavor, right? On a more substantial note, we have Alter Time, and this is a pretty big deal. I'm going to give you the bad news here, though, which is that displacement is gone. Displacement was where you could return to where you blinked from, right? You could blink back to where you blinked from. That's gone, but Alter Time is here. 1-minute cooldown, alter the fabric of time, returning you to your current location and health when cast a second time or after 10 seconds. So, I mean, like, let's say hypothetically I've got a bomb on me. I'm going to blink out. Boom, bomb goes off. Alter time back. I'm back with all the health I had. I've returned to my position. I think this is very, very cool. And I guess it does something very similar to what Displacement did, but this is now baseline for all mage specs. And I think, you know, having Blink and Alter Time be sort of a universal across mage specs I think that does work as the class fantasy. And it's something that you can understand and play around pretty well. So it's going to be a satisfying thing that you can make cool plays with in raiding, in PvP, maybe in Mythic Plus. Not as easy, I think, to make plays in Mythic Plus. Very much so in raids, though, because fights are quite predictable. And in PvP, you could do some really fancy things with this if you're into that. So yeah, kind of cool there. We also have Mirror Image is now baseline as well. No longer talent. This is pretty straightforward. If I get into combat with this guy, I pop Mirror Image. My mirror images are there, and they're just gonna Arcane Blast this guy. It's just more damage. It does end up being pretty good damage. I think, again, it's gonna be while they're active about, you know, and you're blasting your cooldowns and stuff, like on pull with Bloodlust. I mean, the mirror images last for 40 seconds. Bloodlust is 40 seconds. It looks pretty cool. It doesn't look as good with Arcane Mage. It's just a lower tier ability for Arcane Mage, because Arcane Blast, it doesn't look as cool as throwing Frostbolts or Fireballs. Doesn't look as good. There's no projectile. That's crucial. It's all about the looks, right? Actually, kind of is with mirror images. It's just sort of passive damage that just sort of happens, and it is kind of about the looks. But generally speaking, it's a fun thematic ability that's not going to have too much of an effect on your gameplay. It will get in the way a little bit in terms of a little bit of GCD bloat, especially on pull. So that is something, but on the whole, I think it's fine. It looks cool. I'm kind of happy this is back baseline for all mage specs. I think it's really neat. And then, okay, we also have a couple of other things coming from the Frost Mage. We have Frostbolt is now a baseline ability for the Arcane Mage. You're not going to use this for damage or really anything other than using this for the utility of doing a 50% movement speed slow for 8 seconds could be good for some kiting in Mythic Plus or PvP. You never know when this might be useful. Kind of nice to have it there, even if it's not going to be used that much. And then we also have Fire Blast. So this does 683 fire damage for only 1000 mana, so it's very cheap. Though it does have an 11-second cooldown. And it's instant cast, so you can use it on the move. So that's actually quite nice. This works pretty well for Arcane Mage. This works much better for Arcane than it did for Frost, right? Because Frost had Ice Lance, which is like spammable and only does slightly less damage. This is kind of nice for Arcane because it's like such a cheap spell. It's just something you can throw out on the move. And kind of preserve your arcane charges and so your Arcane Mage gameplay style. For the talents, we have a few buffs to talents, which are definitely going to mix things up. First of all, Amplification is now awesome, right? They made this twice as good. When clear cast, Arcane Missiles will now fire 2 additional missiles instead of just 1. So that's really nice. And it's going to make those Arcane Missiles feel really, really powerful, I think. Shimmer has been nerfed, of course. Blink is a 15-second cooldown on the GCD. Shimmer gives it 2 charges with a 25-second cooldown, but it's not on the GCD, and you can shimmer while you're casting and all that stuff, right? So I definitely think that this tier for Arcane Mage is actually much better now, because Shimmer's been nerfed. Mana Shield is now better. Prismatic Barrier has no cooldown, but your mana is drained by 35% of the damage it absorbs. That used to be, I think, 50%. Now it's only 35%, so that's a buff to Mana Shield. Maybe a thing in like PvP, I don't know, or maybe some Mythic Plus stuff. I definitely think that Slipstream, though. I'm loving Slipstream as the Arcane Mage. This feels really good. Where clear casting allows magic missiles. D&D, why? Arcane missiles to be channeled while moving, and also evocation can be channeled while moving. So this just feels really nice, right? It feels really good. It gives you that mobility to move around a bit. And the baseline blink is by itself actually pretty solid compared to like I think there's actually much more of a choice here now than there was. Like in BFA, you're just, you know, a shimmer and only shimmer for the most part. Now it's a much more broad choice, and I think that's good. At level 30, Focus Magic is a new talent. Increase the target's chance to critically hit with spells by 5% for 30 minutes. When the target critically hits, your chance to critically hit will also be buffed by 5% for 10 seconds. You can't cast it on yourself, can only have it on one target. So that's kind of interesting. I mean, it's very passive, like in Cantor's Flow. Crit's not doing anything particularly exciting for us. But I mean, you get to buff an ally and buff yourself at the same time, which is kind of nice. That being said, Rune of Power is so good with Touch of the Magi. They just sync up so well that I feel like in most circumstances, Rune of Power is going to be more attractive, or just in Cantor's Flow. I mean, maybe you'll see some use of this in some circumstances, but Rune of Power really does fit very well with the new Arcane Mage baseline cooldown of Touch of the Magi. So kind of pushed into that one a little bit, I think. Okay. At level 40, Ring of Frost has also been buffed, so when the Incapacitate effect expires, enemies will be slowed by 65% for 4 seconds, so that's a big deal for PvP, and could be nice for some utility in Mythic Plus. At level 45, replacing the former passive Touch of the Magi version, there's now a new talent called Enlightened. Arcane damage dealt while above 70% mana is increased by 8%, and mana regen while below 70% is increased by 20%. This talent here is actually a little bit of a concern, I would say. So you've got Reverberate. If Arcane Explosion hits at least 3 targets, has a 40% chance to generate an extra arcane charge. That's really fun in AoE. The problem is that Enlightened still works in AoE, but it also works on single targets. So this works all the time and everywhere. So that's maybe a little bit of a concern. I mean, maybe it'll turn out with tuning that you actually do have like more variety here. There's Nether Tempest, which is kind of wonky, kind of clunky. Like not a big fan of this one. That's a bit of a weird one. But yeah, so I don't know. Like, we'll see exactly how it will pan out. But this could force quite a niche sort of gameplay style of really focusing on conserving mana and being maxed out on mana for your burn windows. I kind of prefer being more flexible with the mana myself, but it is there. And yeah, then I think level 50 is still the same. Though, of course, Overpowered is sort of nerfed by virtue of the fact that Arcane Power is now a 3-minute cooldown rather than 1.5-minute cooldown. For our legendaries, then, we have 4 generic legendaries for all mages and 4 Arcane Mage specific legendaries. First of all, here we have the Shadowgas Ring. Casting a Frost, Fire, and Arcane spell within 10 seconds of each other increases your critical strike damage of all of your spells by 10%. This effect can only occur once every 30 seconds. So this one, I feel like it's not too great for Arcane. Like for Frost, you've got lots of crit with Frost, obviously with Fingers of Frost procs and your Shatter combo and all that good stuff. With Fire, obviously with Combustion, this has some potential usage. For Arcane, not so much, and also it's going to be very clunky. You can weave in a Fire Blast to your rotation, I guess is not too bad. Weaving in Frostbolt is a little bit weird though. I feel like this is a bit of a meme legendary, just to be like, ooh, look, we now have these different spells are all baseline. Let's have a legendary to work with them. But yeah, for Arcane, not really seeing it for Arcane. Maybe for it works okay for Frost. I don't know. We'll see for the other ones though. A triple threat here. Triple threat. Casting any barrier spell grants the effects of Blazing Barrier, Ice Barrier, and Prismatic Barrier. Each absorbed shield has 40% effectiveness. This is quite intriguing, seeing as Mana Shields. This could have a particularly good combo with Mana Shield, although obviously at the start of the expansion this is not something you're probably going to run at all. You're going to want to run something that ups your damage because you can only have one legendary equipped, but maybe later in the expansion they could split like utility legendaries and throughput legendaries, or they could let you equip loads of them. Who knows what they'll do, and maybe then this could have some use. It doesn't work right now, it's broken on the beta, but I imagine this could have a cool visual effect, so that might be pretty neat. And yeah, it could have some interesting gameplay things, like in PvP, I don't know, but we'll see. For now, though, it's like it's kind of a dead legendary on launch, but has the potential to be quite fun later on. We'll see. Expanded Mind here. In this case, your Arcane Blast has a chance to give you expanded potential, which causes your next clear casting to not be consumed. So that's kind of nifty. It's kind of nifty. You know, it's going to let you just spam a whole bunch more Arcane Missiles, which could work out quite well in your Burst of Touch of the Magi window. It could be quite satisfying. So I think it's pretty fine. Let's see. Here we go. The proc rate doesn't seem all that good. We're Arcane Blasting. We haven't procced it yet. Certainly, I thought this was pretty okay for Fire Mage. Here we go. So we've got the expanded potential, and now I can do my Magic Missiles and Arcane Missiles again, and I can even go again there. We got a whole bunch off in a row. So I think this legendary, actually for all the specs, does have some potential. Because Clear Casting, Hot Streak, and Brain Freeze are all pretty substantial abilities. So this one is one to keep an eye on. And yeah, Grimveil Sandals. This one could be good. I mean, if it ends up being good, especially if you're multi-speccing, this could be a snazzy one to pick up first as your first legendary, because it's just going to work for every spec. So if you're hopping around each spec on Shadowlands launch and trying them all out in Torghast, that's a legendary that could be quite potent for every spec. Grimveil Hood then, your Frost, Fire, and Arcane damage against enemies affected by Frost Nova is increased by 10%, no longer breaks it. Maybe good for some soloing stuff, some solo Torghast stuff, maybe good in PvP. But quite niche, I would think. Not really a PvE or a raiding legendary, or really a Mythic Plus legendary either at all. Frost Nova is just going to break from other players. Then we have our Arcane-specific legendaries. First of all, this one is the fun one coming back. While you have Temporal Displacement or other similar effects, so like Sated from Bloodlust, right? You may use Time Warp at reduced effectiveness, getting 15% haste for 20 seconds. So that's kind of a neat one. You know, it's relatively simple, but it's kind of fun. You know, like someone else in your group pops Bloodlust. Okay, great. Then when you come around to your Arcane Power window again the second time, you still have 7 seconds on that Bloodlust buff, debuff, but you can Bloodlust yourself and get that benefit, 15% haste. Kind of neat, you know. It's just a bit of a laugh, kind of a fun one to play around. Definitely will be enjoyable if they allow you to equip multiple legendaries over the course of the expansion. This will be really fun to play with. We shall see. Next up, we have the Grimveil Cape. Arcane Barrage deals an additional 40% damage against targets below 35% health. So obviously, like in AoE, like our typical AoE rotation, you know, we're going to go in, we're going to be doing like Arcane, we're going to be doing our Arcane Explosions, and our Arcane Barrage, like when we're not in our Touch of the Magi window. So you're going to be spamming this stuff, so this should be a good throughput buff to your AoE damage. Definitely with, as well with Resonance, where Arcane Barrage doing more damage per targeted hits. That could be a solid increase to like the sort of damage that you're doing here in that sort of execute window. Maybe it could even have some sort of single target relevance as well. I'm not particularly sure, but it could be very good, like I said, in AoE. So there you go. Next up, Evocation will give 2 arcane charges, and while channeling Evocation, your intellect is increased by 2% every 0.9 seconds, and that will last for 30 seconds. So this one is not the most exciting thing in the world. It will certainly let you get more smoothly into a burn rotation, and certainly it can be a little bit tricky to, you know, perfectly utilize Touch of the Magi on cooldown and perfectly utilize Arcane Power on cooldown. with your evocation stuff. Like, you kind of want to get evocation right after your arcane power burn once you run out of mana. And then, like, just to make that stuff sync up a little bit better. This could be okay for that, getting you into your arcane charge, your burn phase a bit faster. And the intellect buff is certainly good. You know, evocation is a 5.6 second channel. You're getting this every 0.9 seconds, so you're going to get 6 stacks. You're going to get 12% more intellect, which is good for 30 seconds. That's going to help your burn window. It's not bad. It's not bad. The final one, though, is a bit more interesting to me, and that is this one. That increases the damage done by arcane missiles by 10%, so this is quite fun, because this already increases the value, for example, of amplification and of slipstream, right, to a certain degree. Certainly of amplification to really do a lot more arcane missile damage. And also, each time arcane missiles hits an enemy, the damage of your next arcane barrage is increased by 2%, and this effect will stack. So this, again, is going to feel really good for AoE. It's, number one, it's giving you more single target damage with arcane missiles, and that's going to feel really good. Like, let's say you're in a dungeon in AoE. Well, more damage from arcane missiles. Instead of just using my clear casting procs on arcane explosion, now I'm much more now I'm weaving in those arcane explosion and arcane barrage spam. I'm actually going to stop, and instead of using the clear casting and arcane explosion, I can now use it on arcane missiles, get some priority target damage, and also start building up for like these bigger, better barrages, which is quite fun. And then it also, of course, you know, you're getting the AoE benefit with the barrage burst damage, a boost damage in AoE. But you're also upping your single target damage, which ties in really well to Touch of the Magi. So you're doing more damage to the arcane missile single target, making those Touch of the Magi windows and that cleave damage better, whilst also getting the AoE effect. So yeah, a really fun legendary that I think just sort of, it's kind of nice that it makes those arcane missile talents better. I love arcane missiles. I just think it looks so cool. It's such a visually neat ability that 10% more damage is gonna feel pretty good. And yeah. Casting missiles going to feel really impactful, which is great. Really, really good. So here we go. Bam. Lots and lots of missiles. In fact, we can cast it again. You can see that we're building up here. With 2 of those casts, our next Arcane Barrage is going to do 33% more damage. And that could do a decent chunk in AoE. Let's see if it will hit these guys in AoE. Bam. There you go. Not too shabby, right? Not too shabby. For your conduits, then, they slot into your soulbind, stuff like this. It's still a bit of a work in progress, but you've got, you know, endurance conduits, which boost survivability, finesse, which boost utility, and then potency, which boost your damage. And you can sort of choose your path through each of the conduits and choose which ones you're going to use. For mage, we have 3 endurance conduits right now. While inside Ice Block, heal for 15% of your maximum health over the duration. That's Cryo Freeze. Diverted Energy, your barriers heal you for 20% of the damage absorbed. And then Tempest Barrier, gain a shield that absorbs 5% of your maximum health for 15 seconds after you blink. I mean, these are all relatively straightforward. They're just going to like up your survivability a little bit. Nothing too special there. I mean, perhaps some sort of synergy between Mana Shield and the Diverted Energy. So that might be pretty good. But yeah, relatively straightforward. Finesse conduits are a bit more exciting. First up, Winter's Protection. Cooldown of Ice Block is reduced by 30 seconds. Flow of Time. Cooldown of Blink is reduced by 1 second. Grounding Surge. Successfully interrupting an enemy with Counterspell reduces its cooldown by 1 second. And then Incantation of Swiftness. Invisibility increases your movement speed by 20% for 6 seconds. So each single one of these for the Arcane Mage has really good potential, especially if these scale up with item level, which we do expect them to do, and the effects getting more powerful, more potent. Winter's Protection, I mean, like, just a shorter cooldown on Ice Block, more immunities, more opportunities to play around that in PvP, to play around it in raids for soaking mechanics, and Mythic Plus to avoid mechanics, you know. Very nice stuff there. Less cooldown on Blink, more mobility, that's just awesome. And again, if this scales up, it could get really good. It could have really good synergy with Shimmer as well. Maybe Shimmer will actually come back as a mandatory pick if this is strong enough. We shall see. Grounding Surge is the most intriguing one for all mages here. Like, if this scales up, like, hypothetically, if this scales up to 9 seconds of cooldown reduction, which is maybe a bit too much to expect, but still, that would bring Counterspell from a 24-second cooldown down to a 15-second cooldown. That's equal to a melee kick. And that has radical implications for creating groups in Mythic Plus. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're running with something like a Shadow Priest, well, Shadow Priest kick is on such a long cooldown, it becomes really difficult to also run a mage in that group, because it's difficult to find enough kicks then to cover all the mechanics that you need to cover. Grounding Surge opens up a lot of different comps if you can reduce the cooldown of your interrupt. That's a massive deal. And then finally, Incantation of Swiftness. This is much more relevant for Arcane Mage than the other mage specs. For them, invisibility is a 5-minute cooldown. We have greater invisibility though, which is number 1 better, and number 2 has a 2-minute cooldown. So yeah, that's actually pretty substantial. That could be quite good. I mean, greater invisibility is a very potent damage resistance cooldown. 60% reduced damage. Even if the invisibility breaks immediately, that's still 60% reduced damage for 3 seconds, and 20% move speed as well. That's kind of nifty, kind of like a mini nether walk type thing from a demon hunter in a sense. So pretty cool. Or mini dispersion from a shadow priest, right? Kind of cool. Definitely fits better for Arcane Mage. Kind of terrible for the other mages, but pretty good for us. Then we also have potency conduits, and there's 4 right now for the Arcane Mage. Arcane Prodigy, Arcane Missiles reduces the cooldown of Arcane Power by 0.1 seconds. So I believe this is every missile hit. However, this is a little bit clunky in the sense that, like, okay, there's obviously synergies with your missile talents and shooting more missiles. But the thing is, right, Touch of the Magi is a 45-second cooldown, and Arcane Power is a 3-minute cooldown. These already naturally sync up. So like you're casting the first one's on pull, then a 45-second cooldown, then 1 minute 30, then whatever, like 2:25, I don't know, and then at 3 minutes as well. So it's going to sync up eventually with Arcane Power. Running this, you can desync those cooldowns, which is not good. You really want to stack the 2 of those together. So we'll see how that actually works out. Will it actually be a good thing, or will it just get in your way? Magi's Brand, this is really good. Touch of the Magi accumulates an additional 5% of the damage you deal. And again, as this scales up, this is going to get really nice. Again, as just enhancing that cleave damage window. Actually, Touch of the Magi by default, is 25% accumulated damage. I already have this conduit applied right now. But yeah, this is awesome, and really enhances what to me is one of the most exciting things about this spec, which is those mini burst windows with cleave potential every 45 seconds. So this is a great one. Nether Precision, consuming clear casting increases the damage of your next 2 arcane blasts by 10%. Again, this works really well with the clear casting stacks, and you could again play around it. You build up like 2 or 3 arcane missile stacks. I can do arcane missile, 2 blasts, arcane missile, 2 blasts, and so on, and kind of weave them together. So I actually like the gameplay thing of this a lot. So that's fantastic. And finally then, Artifice of the Archmage, Arcane Barrage has a 10% chance to grant 2 arcane charges. So this one again is really nice, particularly for some AoE. It's a low chance to proc right now, but it's going to feel pretty good when you do get that proc. You can just get a couple of arcane explosions off into another barrage. That could be kind of nice, and again, sort of cool synergies with like the execute damage there from Arcane Barrage. So an intriguing one to see for sure. So yeah, I think the conduits for the Arcane Mage are actually looking pretty good. Like the endurance ones are relatively bland, but the finesse ones are all very cool, and quite a few nice ones there as well in the potency. Apart from Arcane Prodigy, which is still a very large question mark, but the rest are very awesome. For the Kyrian mages then, I'm getting real tired now. My eyes are drooping, but we're powering through here. Summon Steward is your signature ability, which is cool. This little guy pops over, gives you the Phial of Serenity, which restores 15% health and removes all disease, poisons, curses, and bleeds affecting you. It's got 3 charges. You can use 1 per each combat. It's kind of like a health stone. So obviously situationally very, very strong. And then the Covenant ability for mages is the Radiant Spark. This is a 30-second cooldown, 1.5 second cast, 40-yard range. Conjure a Radiant Spark that causes 700 arcane damage instantly, and an additional 300 arcane damage over 8 seconds. And then the target will take 10% increased damage from your direct damage spells, stacking each time they're struck, and this effect will end after 4 spells. So this has pros and it has cons. The good thing about this is that it's quite easy to utilize this as arcane. It's quite easy. So for example, like if I just build up, like 4 arcane charges here. Okay, I go into my 4 arcane charges. Now it's perfect to pop my Radiant Spark, and then, max charge Arcane Blast or hitting hard. Each one's going to do more damage. Bam, bam, bam. That's going to feel pretty good. That's going to feel relatively substantial. So that is a good thing. One bad thing, actually, there's a couple of bad things about this. So I've already talked about how we're really working around Touch of the Magi. Touch of the Magi is a 45-second cooldown. And again, you're also very much incentivized to run Rune of Power with this, which has a recharge. So that's actually, you can let it overcap on the recharge and you're going to be fine as it starts channeling up the second charge. That's going to sync up with your Touch of the Magi just fine every 45 seconds. Radiant Spark is a 30-second cooldown. This doesn't sync up at all. So it could easily end up for Arcane Mage in the rather clunky situation where you want to delay Radiant Spark by half of its cooldown. It comes up 30 seconds. You're going to wait an additional 15 seconds before using this to sync up all those CDs. And that's going to feel a little bit bad. On top of that, again, if I go into Rune of Power, right, we already have a relatively awkward then interaction where I'm going to want to go Radiant Spark into Rune of Power, into Touch of the Magi, and like that's already awkward. In fact, I'm not even going to have enough time to utilize all of its buffs there. Like, it just doesn't work out. There's too many GCDs overlapping there. So that's another massive concern. In fact, it might be better to, clearly it's better to do Rune of Power into Touch of the Magi into Radiant Spark, which is fine, but you're not going to do, I don't know, like, I guess it will add up to more damage overall, but it's just that little bit clunky. Those GCDs just kind of get in each other's way. So that's going to get kind of annoying to have to work that in every single time. That feels a little bit more awkward to me than let's say some of the other Covenant abilities. So that's a downside. And the other downside is that it really doesn't synergize well with Arcane Missiles. As you can see, Arcane Missiles, by default, is just going to consume all of the charges of Radiant Spark all in one go, which is terrible. So this is another problem, that while Radiant Spark is on, you really don't want to use Arcane Missiles at all. You want to be focusing on the Arcane Blasts, or perhaps the end of the Touch of the Magi damage proc. You want to be focusing on that stuff instead, so that's extra clunky, right? Let's actually try this out here. So let's go into this. We'll go with our Touch of the Magi. We'll go with our Radiant Spark. And I pressed Arcane Missiles by accident, which consumed some of the charges, so that's bad. But that actually works out pretty well there. So that's synergized a little bit better, but still, I have concerns with that. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I personally sort of avoided this in Arcane Mage until someone does the actual numbers testing and figures out if it's going to be worth it to delay and pop into your cooldowns like that. For me, it kind of gets in the way a bit too much. Although, again, you can use it to spam those blasts, which could be good. Possibly you could use it on some Arcane Barrages as well, like do 3 blasts, then do a big Arcane Barrage. Could be good too. Who knows? We'll see. But yeah, some pros, some cons. Let me know what you think. The Covenant ability here for the Arcane Mage with the Necrolords is actually pretty solid. So first of all, we have Fleshcraft, a 2-minute cooldown, 4-second channel, generate a shield that will last for 2 minutes for up to 20% of your maximum health. If you channel near a corpse or near multiple corpses, you can power up this shield, and it can get as strong as 50% of your maximum health, which is just overall a really nice boost to your survivability. It feels good, and again, you've got enough mobility, I think, as a mage to make good use of this. Like, you kill a pack of Mythic Plus, channel your shield, and you can rejoin your group pretty quickly. And it's going to be pretty nifty. It's going to be pretty nice. A little more difficult to use actually in combat, but it could help with certain things. So yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of Fleshcraft. Then we have Deathborn, and this one is really nice looking for the Arcane Mage. Transform into a powerful skeletal mage for 20 seconds by default. It's up by 3 seconds here, thanks to a Conduit. It's a 3-minute cooldown with a 1.5 second cast, 5,000 mana cost. While in the form of a skeletal mage, your Frostbolt, Fireball, and Arcane Blast hit up to 2 enemies near your target, and your spell damage is increased by 10%. So this is obviously amazing, seeing as our Arcane Blast is one of our hardest hitting abilities. It's such a core part of our damage. Having that now work in a cleave situation is again, it's just phenomenal. And, you know, it's just another cleave tool on top of Touch of the Magi. The other nice thing is that as a 3-minute cooldown, it does sync up perfectly with Arcane Power. So you're going to like pop Deathborn, then you're going to pop Arcane Power, throw it on your Rune of Power, Touch of the Magi combo, and then you're just going to start blasting, and you're going to do a lot more damage. You're going to carry that 10% spell power through all of that burst, plus all of the cleave effect. It just syncs up pretty well. I mean, yeah, there's quite a few GCDs to press there to get into your burst combo, but it does feel very satisfying. And certainly, like for Fire Mage, it's cleaving your Fireball. For Arcane, for Frost Mage, it's cleaving Frostbolt. And those are, like, the Fireball's pretty weak. Frostbolt, it can be sort of okay with one of the Legendaries. Arcane Blast is definitely like a more stellar ability though. So I believe it does do reduced damage, which it doesn't say in the tooltip. Don't know if that's intended or not. If you can see, like, I'm hitting them for 600. I'm hitting these guys in cleave for, well, it's kind of random actually. I don't know. It does seem like, generally speaking, I am hitting them for less damage, but that's still an awful lot of damage to add in. And again, this is casting it just like on its own. When you add this with other abilities in there as well, that's going to do an awful lot more damage. It's going to do quite a bit of stuff as cleave. So this is a great one for the Arcane Mage. This one looks really, really damn good. Next up, we have Venthyr. I'm not even going to bother switching into Arcane Spec. I just record the fire video. We're not even going to like flip my character over to Arcane to show you this one, because it's so terrible. Signature ability, though, is really good. Door of Shadows is great. 1 minute cooldown, 1.5 second cast, 35-yard range. Point and click, teleport where you want to go. Awesome. That's fantastic, obviously. However, the Covenant ability for mages is Mirrors of Torment. 1.5 minute cooldown, 1.5 second cast, 40-yard range. Conjure 3 mirrors to torment the enemy for 20 seconds. Whenever the target casts a spell or ability, a mirror is consumed to do 740 shadow damage, and their movement and cast speed are slowed by 15%. The final mirror will instead inflict about 2,000 shadow damage to the enemy, rooting and silencing them for 4 seconds. So, in PvP, phenomenal ability. Wow, super powerful, like super strong. In PvE, though, very awkward. Very awkward. And this is the problem with this. I don't think it's good Covenant ability design at all. Because you could easily have raid bosses where this could do nothing. Like, they just won't use abilities. That, like, they won't do enough stuff to proc this ability. You could easily have dungeon bosses that won't do enough. Or tough dungeon mobs that won't do stuff that will actually proc this. Or you will have some caster mobs, but those casts are going to be kicked or interrupted. Or they're going to be stunned. And, you know, it's not going to work. They're not actually going to get those casts off. It's going to be kind of clunky. What a pain in the ass to actually use this. Like, it's just not good that you can have actual like raid fights, actual situations where this will do almost nothing. And indeed then as well, of course, a good chunk of the power of this ability is going to be baked into the move speed and cast speed slow of 15%, and it's going to be baked into the 4 seconds of root and silence, right? Those are very potent effects. But again, like a raid boss, you can't root raid bosses. You can't silence raid bosses. You can't slow their cast speed or their move speed either. So, like, those effects are entirely useless on those raid bosses. Okay, that will be perhaps good on some dungeon mobs and stuff like that. But, yeah, I know. Like, a Covenant is... You're supposed to stick with a Covenant pretty much for the expansion. You want your Covenant ability to feel good to use and to be generally useful in most circumstances. Mirrors of Torment. This is good if you're a PvP mage. But if you're interested in PvE at all, this rapidly becomes very unappealing. So I really hope that they revisit this and change how it works. I don't know, make some of these effects a conduit that you can put in if you want a PvP. I don't know, just do something so that this feels better in PvE. I mean, it looks really visually cool. Badass cast and cool little mirrors floating around. But like, I mean, like this I can't, it literally, it doesn't do anything. The training it does nothing. Nothing, it does nothing. It's just a nice glowy visual effect to slow down your computer. That's it. So, bit of a bummer. And then we finally have the Night Fae, and unfortunately the quest line is bugged right now. And again, I'm not able to show you this, I don't think, because they're wiping all the characters off the servers, and on the beta we're gonna have to just re-level characters. I will try for sure to get back and to show you this one, because I think this Covenant ability is very intriguing, in particular for Arcane Mage. I'm quite excited for this one. I can show you the description now, but stay tuned for some gameplay. Like, I have enjoyed Arcane Mage in particular so much that I think it's quite likely that on the beta, I'll probably level up an Arcane Mage, like, just to play it some more and to test it some more, because I'm genuinely considering that this could end up being my main spec when we go into Shadowlands. I've had that much fun with it. Anyway, Soul Shape, this is the signature, right? You turn into a Vulpin, teleport 15 yards, you gain 50% movement speed while in Vulpin form, has a 1.5 minute cooldown, it lasts 12 seconds, and you can reactivate your flicker button here to get extra 15-yard teleports. So that's a massive amount of mobility in that spell. Very, very cool. I mean, you already again have the blinks as a mage, so that's a bit of overlap there, but nonetheless it's pretty okay. Pretty okay. Then the Covenant ability is called Shifting Power. This has a 45-second cooldown. Draw power from the ground beneath, doing 2,300 nature damage over 5.6 seconds. It's 6 seconds by default, reduced by haste, to enemies within 15 yards. While channeling, your mage ability cooldowns are reduced by 3 seconds every 1.4 seconds. You get 4 procs of that. So you're going to get 12-second cooldown reduction on all of your mage abilities while you're channeling this. This one is very interesting to me as Arcane Mage. Very interesting. So number one, you're already with Arcane Explosion. That's within 10 yards. So in order to do AoE damage as an Arcane Mage, you're already close. Like, this is a little bit more clunky if you're a Frost Mage and you're 30 yards away. You've got to, like, blink in to actually use this, right? As an Arcane Mage, though, you're already close to the enemies to actually utilize your AoE. So this kind of fits in. You're going to be in range to make use of this anyway, which is nice. And then the cooldown reduction is absolutely massive for us, right? You're going to get into those Touch of the Magi windows more quickly. You're going to reduce the cooldown on Arcane Power. The thing is, because it's like flat cooldown reduction across everything, it's still going to keep the stuff synced up. Like your Touch of the Magi, your Evocation, your Arcane Power, they're all still going to be synced up. So that's nice. On top of that, also, much like Arcane Missiles, it's sort of like a mana gain because you're not spending mana while you clear cast Arcane Missiles, clear cast specifically. It gives you time to regen mana. Although this is a long channel, you're also regenning mana while you're doing this. So it's kind of like pushing you closer to your Touch of the Magi cooldowns, and also giving you more mana to play with by virtue of you not spending mana on Arcane Explosions while that's going on, which I think is quite interesting. So yeah, I think this one has a ton of potential. Obviously, the big downside is it is a default 6-second channel. That's a massive channel. If you have to move, this loses a lot of value. And obviously the damage is AoE. In single target, it's not quite as good, though the cooldown reduction is fantastic still for single target. So this one is very intriguing, and I'm very upset that I couldn't get to test this yet. This guy's having a lot of fun with this error right now. He's like, please, before the server reset, before they wipe me, before they destroy my characters, let me test my Covenant ability. I know the feeling. I think this one could be really good. I think there's a lot of potential for shifting power. So stay tuned. Like I said, it's extremely likely that I will play more Arcane Mage, and it's extremely likely that I'll try Night Fae, and we'll see how this one actually pans out in practice. Is it as good in practice as I think it might be? I think a lot of people are put off by the channel, but I think if you're smart, if you work around it, it could really pay huge dividends and be super satisfying. So yeah. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Arcane Mage on the Shadowlands beta. Like I said, this could be the sleeper hit for me. I've really slept on Arcane Mage in the past. Like, I never paid all that much attention to it, never really had any interest in it. But having actually sat down and played it on the beta here, I had so much fun playing this spec. It's super good. This spec is phenomenal. I love the change they did. I know a lot of people, like, when they saw the change to Arcane Power, were kind of going like, why did they do this? Blizzard, the spec isn't being played much at all. Why are we nerfing Arcane Power and doubling its cooldown? I actually think it works out really damn well because of Touch of the Magi. And I just love that the planning where you've got the smaller burst windows at Touch of the Magi, and then you got the really big burst windows every 3 minutes. It's satisfying. It's something that I found unsatisfying about Fire Mage. Was with the Fire Mage, it's like, yeah, you've got the big burst window with combustion every 2 minutes, and then you just feel kind of like arse between that. You're just kind of faffing about, going like, why am I here? What is life? What are we doing? I don't know. What's for breakfast? This is horrible. This is the worst. You know, Arcane Mage, you always have something to look forward to because you're managing your mana as well and your arcane charges. So you're already like planning ahead. You're going, okay, cool. I got Touch of the Magi's coming up in 20 seconds. Where am I in terms of mana? Do I need to start conserving? How much can I afford to spend? Where am I going to go? Make sure I have my charges built up. Make sure I'm at 4 charges going into Touch of the Magi. I want to make sure I'm ready to pop that on cooldown and blast. Awesome. Fantastic. It works so well. It just gives a constant flow to the spec. And again, it gives a lot of variety to the spec as well that, you know, without Touch of the Magi, I think in Mythic Plus, like, you'd be going in AoE and you just be like Arcane Explosion, Arcane Explosion, Arcane Explosion, Arcane Barrage, Explosion, blah, 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 Barrage, and just those abilities over and over again. It really adds a lot of variety that, yeah, you do have that AoE rotation, but then you also have those, you know, every 45 seconds, you've got that 10-second burst window where you're going, okay, here we go. It's single target time, boys. Let's blast. Single target. Let's go. Throw all that into my priority target, and then they explode at the end for a really good cleave. That's just, I love it. I love it. I think it's amazing. What a great gameplay style. Just a cool damage profile. It just feels great to play around. Massive fan here. On top of that, I do think the conduits that we're getting are pretty okay for Arcane Mage. Like, they're pretty decent. They're pretty all right. You know, the conduits are never the most exciting thing, but I definitely think the finesse conduits in particular, again, for all mages, do stand out as having a lot of potential. Like, shorter cooldown on Blink, shorter cooldown on Counterspell, Ice Block. Those are, and in particular for Arcane Mage, making greater invisibility better. Those are all extremely potent abilities that can radically change how you approach a fight. So they're going to feel so good to be able to alter with conduits. I'm really looking forward to that part. Yeah, the legendaries look fun as well. In particular, I like the Arcane Missile legendary. I feel like that's very satisfying and ties into more of an Arcane Missile build, which is just visually cool and feels right to me. And yeah, then the Covenant abilities are certainly a weak point for the mage. I think there's no question about that. Like, the Venthyr one is, you know, it's a PvP ability. It's a PvP ability. That's just the long and short of it. The Kyrian one, I really don't like for Arcane Mage. I know a lot of people, that's their favorite one. For me, don't like it. It just feels clunky. That's too many GCDs clashing into each other. Not fantastic. It may end up being the best one, though. We'll have to see. Again, the cooldown is quite desync from what you want to be doing, that I'm not sure if it will work out. The Necrolord one feels awesome. Necrolord looks really good for Arcane Mage. And it also looks quite good for Frost Mage too. So that could be a really good one. Sort of your safe bet, just big 3-minute cooldown that syncs up with your other big 3-minute cooldown. And obviously for the Arcane Mage in particular, Arcane Blast does a ton of damage. Like, a ton of damage. And that's the thing that cleaves. So that's going to be very powerful for the Arcane Mage. So that could easily be the go-to. And I think I'm fine with that. You know, I don't really like being a Skeletal Mage. But I really like Fleshcraft. And if it's that powerful an ability, and unlike the Kyrian one, unlike Kyrian, it's not getting in my way, I'm happy with that. And then Night Fae, which unfortunately I didn't get to test, but for me, looks very, very cool. I'm excited to try the Shifting Power. I think that could be really interesting and sort of speed up and play around like those shorter cooldowns, right? You know, you're playing around those shorter 45-second-ish cooldowns of Shifting Power and of the Touch of the Magi. And it's just, you're going to have so many different things to consider. I think that's what's really fun. With Shifting Power, you're going to be like, okay, where can I fit my Shifting Power in? And with that cooldown reduction, where am I going to fit in my next Touch of the Magi? Okay, and my next Arcane Power is coming in closer. Got to be ready for that. That's going to be great. More mirror images, you know. Yeah, I'm really impressed by this spec. It has a good single target flow, great AoE flow. Yeah, this is a sleeper hit. I definitely think that my suspicion is that a lot of the people that have enjoyed playing Mage in BFA and liked it for the Fire Mage and that big burst power and sort of the cleave that was inherent in that, and just like the big flashy cooldown that feels awesome. I think a lot of those people are probably going to come into Shadowlands. They're going to try the Fire Mage and go, this is slow, this is clunky, this feels awful. Like, it's been nerfed so much. It's just so much worse than it is in BFA. This feels bad. Where can I get some, like, a gameplay style that's kind of like that flows and makes sense? And you're going to look at the Arcane Mage and go, oh, here's my new burst best friend. My new burst best friend. Let's go. So yeah, there you guys go. That's what I think. Arcane Mage, very, very big thumbs up for me. Like I said, I'm considering that this might end up being my main. Like, I hope that the tuning ends up being good for this. I hope that it does. Because I think that this spec, it's amazing that they made these small little changes, you know, improving the mastery, improve how its cooldowns flow. Just such small changes make a spec just super interesting. It's fascinating to me on a design level. It's super fascinating. I had a blast. An arcane blast. I'll see you next time, guys. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.